Okay, we're going to start actually putting everything together where we actually factor out this polynomial. So the first thing we're going to look for is a GCF. What is the greatest common factor of all three of these? So my greatest common factor of all three is just 1, because all I can do is divide them all by 1 if this first one is 1. So I don't have to worry about pulling that out. Second step is where you're going to slide this 1 over and times it with that 15. So when I do that, it's the same thing even though that 1 is not there. Okay? My next step is where you actually find those factors. So you remember how we set up our x and we found those factors. So I would set up my x, put 15 at the top, positive 8 is what goes at the bottom. I need all the factors of 15, so 1 and 15, 3 and 5. Which set will add or subtract to 8? So the only set that would add would be 3 and 5. My product is positive, my sum is positive, so that means I put positives on both of them. Okay, now is where you're going to fill those in. So remember how I told you that you always have two sets of parentheses and you will always have x's in the front. Since I have positive 3, I put plus 3. Since I have positive 5, I put plus 5. You have just factored that polynomial. Now we got to finish the rest, so we're going to come through and divide. So that number that you slid, you have to come back and divide by that same number to undo what you just did. So we went and slid by 1, so I'm going to divide this 3 by 1, and I'm going to divide that 5 by 1. I always reduce the fractions at this point. So I would reduce 3 over 1 becomes 3, 5 over 1 becomes 5, so here would be my answer. So today we are just focusing on the slide and divide. We're not doing the bottoms up part. That will be next week when we do 8-6. Okay, pause the video, see if you can try the next one. Alright, on the next one we have the polynomial r squared plus 11r plus 24. First thing I checked for is a greatest common factor. So my greatest common factor of all three of these numbers are just 1. So I wouldn't have to worry about pulling it out like we have in the past. Second question, I want to slide over that leading coefficient. So my leading coefficient is a 1. Excuse me. I'm going to times that 1 by 24. So now my polynomial is r squared plus 11r plus 24. Next is I'm going to factor it out. So I'm going to do my giant X and figure out what times to 24 but adds to 11. So your factors should be 3 and 8. So then I write it in my two sets of parentheses. My first one will always be my letter, so r and r. Since it's positive 3, I put plus 3. Since it's positive 8, I put plus 8. Then I need to come back and divide by the number that I slid. So we slid 1, so I would divide the 3 by 1 and the 8 by 1, and then I simplify those fractions. So I would get r plus 3 and r plus 8. If you have questions at this point, please let one of us know so that we can come help you. Okay, flip over to the back side. We're going to talk through this top one together, and then I'm going to pause after the problem 2, so you're going to work on the worksheet. So on problem 2, I have x squared minus 11x plus 24. So my steps are still the same. Greatest common factor is still 1, so I would not have to take that out. Next step is I slide this over. So I have a 1 here, so I would times it by 24. So I would have x squared minus 11x plus 24. I would need to find factors of 24 that add or subtract to negative 11. So now is where your signs are going to come into play. Since this is a negative 11 and I had a positive product, that means I still have the same signs. So these would both be negative. So now I end up getting x minus 3 because it's negative and x minus 8 because that is negative. Then I come back and I divide by the number I slid, which was 1. I simplify those fractions and end up getting x minus 3 times x minus 8. Pause the video and see if you can do the got it question. Okay, in the got it question, I check for a greatest common factor. I can only divide all of those by 1, so that would be my greatest common factor. I slide this 1 over so that it just becomes y squared minus 6y plus 8. I need to find factors of 8 that would add or subtract to negative 6. So when I set up my x, I have negative 6 on the bottom. Since it's a positive 8, they're the same sign. Since it's adding to negative 6, that tells me that both of them have to be negative. So when I write out my sets of parentheses, I would have y and y, negative 4 here, and negative 2 there. I need to come back and divide by the number I slid, which is dividing by 1. I simplify, and I get y minus 4 and y minus 2. Okay. Even though you have more problems on this note-taking guide, we're going to stop and have you work on those types of problems. So it's just focusing on the two types of signs. Tomorrow we'll come back and do the other part.